Stephen, welcome to episode 3. You might notice a notable omission from this week's podcast. Charlie, the guy who normally hosts it, not here. He's off gallivanting around Japan right now. So we figured it would be fun for the three of us to hang out and just chat a little bit. I think, go back through the annals of Incident.io, how we got here, why we're here, all of that kind of fun stuff. Obviously, that means this time a lot less structure, but I think that's going to be fun. I guess if people are hearing this, it went well enough that we decided to put it out. And otherwise, this is going to be 30 minutes of us chatting to each other, which we do enough as it is. So
yeah, but that's still a nice way to spend a Friday.
Listen, there are few people I would rather hang out with than you two. So there you go.
While the cat's away, the mice will play.
Yeah, exactly. If nothing else, this will demonstrate why we really need Charlie. So he'll get to feel very valued on his return.
Yes. Well, we said we'd cover like origin stories. So maybe Pete, like you could start with like the sort of massive existential question of why are we here? Like, what's the reason for Incident?
I thought I'd start with my moment in the Himalayas where I realised what my purpose was in life, and then
tell us about that.
Kind of go from I also really like origin story. Makes us sound like some sort of weird superhero team. I guess we all came at this from slightly different positions. So like for me, I guess even like pre time at Monzo, pre starting Instant.io. So my role was very kind of technical, or like it wasn't like only technical. So I worked very across the business, but my role was kind of at its core a very technical role, right? So it's like I interacted with a lot of other people, legal, marketing, etc. And one of the ways that happened a lot was in incidents. And I still have very fond memories, even though I can't talk about them all, of all the like fires that we ended up fighting. And I remember sort of that wasn't some incredible inspirational like, oh, one day I'm going to start an incident management company moment, but like it had always been a bit of a problem or a process that I always felt was a bit janky. And then I guess sort of Monzo was the moment that crystallized it for me, of just like seeing how this could be done really, really well. And I remember joining Monzo and seeing how some of the tooling work that you'd built. And then we were laughing about this the other day, but like before I even joined Monzo, I remember reaching out to you about that tooling, because I was basically like our incident process here at a company called Kikada. So I was like, it's fine, but it's like a bit janky. It feels like every time I'm like being a robot, I follow the same playbook every time. I'm like creating Slack channels and I'm like updating the status page, and that's fine. That's kind of my job. But it's kind of like, it must be a solution to this. So I looked at all the providers. I found 3 or 4 that were on the market at the time, and was like, in my role, which was sort of a kind of principal engineering type role, I was like, I'm buying on behalf of everyone. None of these feels great. Like also my intuition of like, oh, maybe I should build something is like, I know that's not good. And I remember reaching out to you, I think on Twitter, right? And going, You just tweeted about this Monzo response tool. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, why did you build it? Are there any vendors that I could just buy? And you were basically like, no, I did exactly the same thing. I looked at all the suppliers out there and they were all a bit pants. And then actually what happened was I left GoCardless before I could get that set up. So I kind of cheated and just joined Monzo where it was already all installed. But that was my sort of first sort of run-in with instant management and instant software, I guess.
From my side, I was like, who is this nerd that's DMing me on Twitter?
Who is this weirdo that's reached out of nowhere?
Yeah, exactly.
I was quite impressed that you responded, because I think I had like 100 Twitter followers and you had like lots. So I was like, he's never going to reply. And,
big in the game now I know 500.
The human that you are, Chris. You've been demoted from SRE god status in my mind, but
I remember you being just like unbelievably polite in your DMs, which was just like you were just like caveating these things. It was like, did you think about buying this before building it? Oh, and that's not a leading question, and I'm sorry if you're offended.
I was really worried that what it would come across like is like, why have you built this? Why didn't you just fucking buy it, you moron? And I didn't want to give that impression, so I did a classic, incredibly hedgy. Wrote my tweet like it's a letter to the Prime Minister vibes.
Yeah, it was an interesting prompt actually. I remember you reaching out and flagging another tool in the space, and I was like, I'd literally never heard of them. We were using PagerDuty, and it was exceptional at what we wanted it to do at Monzo, which was like make people's phones make noises, and it did that and never failed. And it was like, you just buy it and it gets out of the way. But yeah, no, it's it's interesting. I sort of stand by the decision to build back then, I think, because I think there wasn't a compelling thing to go and use, and they all had like trade-offs. And for us at Monzo, like it was the fact that all the tools that existed were like super engineering focused. And I was like, the problems I'm seeing on the ground are I need to, I'm running incidents at a bank, and incidents happen quite a lot at banks. And so whether it's your bank or another bank that's down, like there's like constant degradation, it feels like. And so the problems I had were like, I had a team of people who are like, I don't want to be paged and I don't want to be on call because I have literally no idea how to manage the like 50 things I need to do in all the different scenarios that happen. So it's like, I remember the one that terrified me most when I first joined Monzo was like, if you're paged and it's something to do with card payments, you almost certainly need to call up like the MasterCard, like operational command center. And I remember, or they'll call you. So we had like a shared number that they could like dial in on. And you just get a phone call and they'd be like, hi, it's like Clive from operational command center. What are you folks seeing on your side? And I'm like, I'm looking at a Grafana dashboard and I'm not entirely sure right now, but someone else who does know what they're doing is on the way and we'll get back to you.
I don't know what this graph means, but it doesn't look good, Clive.
yeah. Clive, do you reckon red is the right color for this sort of thing?
Nice. Out of curiosity, how long did it take you to, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but like, so I know you built the open source thing, but I wasn't sure if it was like a side project at Monzo or whether it was like part of the work that you did at Monzo or whether it was just like I know you mentioned that it was kind of like inspired by some like conference or Slack thing, but like how did you knock it up in like a weekend, or was it like several months exercise or something?
First version,
spent like 2 years on our version, so
it was the first version was like laughably simple. So in the first instance, what I wanted was a way to have a slash command and a channel and an announcement post that goes somewhere so that folks know something's happened. They have a little like thread that takes them through. And also when I joined Monzo, so Monzo, like massive, like Golang shop, everything written in Go, very, very like consistent about that. And I didn't really know Go. Like I'd done my coding challenge for like part of the interview process in Go, as that was literally my first exposure to it. And so I was like, oh, well, I want this incident thing and I want to learn a bit of Go. So I did it as like a fun evenings project. And it was like two evenings. And all it was a Lambda in AWS running some Go code. And when the slash command came in, it would just be like, boop, here's a Slack post and here's a thing, no state, no nothing. So that was first version. And then it was actually when I was ironically, I was at a PagerDuty conference in San Francisco a little while later. And I went to a talk by John Allspore, and he was talking about like all of the like kinds of insights that people could get from incidents if they chose to actually properly invest in those things. And I then, in a couple of evenings in my hotel room at that conference, sort of like super late night, I then rewrote the whole thing in Python and Django because I didn't want to have to deal with like RMs and like integrating with like databases from Go because I didn't know any of that stuff. And I was like, I know Django really well. So it's like bootstrapped an app, built a thing that stored the state, and suddenly like within an evening I had all of the functionality of the previous thing, but then like a record of an incident happening and a thing on a web page that I could start being like, cool, here's a timeline that we're building. So yeah, nice. that was like how it all came to be in sort of Monzo days.
Yeah, must be quite satisfying. It's kind of cool. Like a lot of people we reach out to, they're like heard of a response, although I'd hope that at some point Instant.io is more prolific.
Yeah, well, we're in that annoying situation where there's a fair few people we speak to, and we're like,
an own goal.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're like, oh, Instant.io looks great, but we have the thing that's sort of like the very primitive version that we've now extended a zillion times over, and we have a team of like 5 engineers that support it, and they don't really want their job to go away, so we're going to keep running the thing ourselves. And we've won a few of them over, and there's a few more that we need to win over in future.
Agreed. I guess so Stephen wasn't tweeting you and nerding out about incidents before we started Instant.io. But I don't know, why did you do this, Stephen?
Yeah, good question. I think I had always been the kind of recipient or receiver of incidents, in that I started, along with a few co-founders, a credit card fraud detection company. So that sat in the kind of synchronous payment flow for a lot of fast-growing companies. And as a result, like we were making these decisions in 300 milliseconds about essentially whether you should let transactions go through or not. So high volume, like low latency, like systems need to be fast and working. So whenever you get small hiccups or small outages, like you were getting paged to go and deal with that stuff. And the sort of distinct memory that I walk away from there is like, why does the software seem to stop as soon as my phone gets paged by, it was Opsgenie we used there. Like you act the page and then it's kind of on me to do everything else. Like I felt like I was gluing together Grafana dashboards alongside status page updates, alongside, trying to copy whatever. It's like kind of CSI style, reconstitute what actually happened for a post-mortem afterwards. And it just felt, it wasn't like one of my biggest problems. For example, like this didn't happen incredibly often, but when it did, it just felt weird and awkward. And then coming to Monzo, I saw really, I think, a bit of like, oh, this is how I would want to solve the problem. If I had time to solve
welcome.
it. Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I guess a bit of I don't know. It's like if I went to a new company, I would want to put a credit card in and like bring some of this stuff with me. So just with like hard-nosed business hat on as well. It's like there feels like there's something here. If both Pete wanted to buy something and could not, and Chris did but had to build his own, and I thought it was weird, that feels like compelling evidence for going and sort of doing something together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I guess like we validated that it was a thing that was useful. Like what was I tried to like recall exactly what the like trigger was for like being like we should do this as a bigger thing, as a sort of side hustle. I think it was that, right? It was you two folks actually, like, ironically, the irony for this whole situation for me is that I have forever wanted to start my own company, right? That has been like lifelong dream to do that and to do it and find this like niche in a product. And so I built the original thing at Monzo, but I actually didn't spot it as like a product opportunity. I think I discounted it and was like, it's not enough in it, that sort of thing. And so it was you two. Like, how did you two? Because you were the first ones you sort of were like, we should do a thing. How did that come about?
I blame Stephen. I think it's your fault we're here. I guess like so my recollection, Stephen can tell me or fill in all the gaps or tell me what's wrong, but it's essentially, we were mid-pandemic. We'd been doing a lot of like hard work, some of which was like writing code, but a lot of which was working on plans and kind of helping to do urgent projects to stabilize the business, all that kind of stuff. It was really good. It was really important work, but we weren't getting to sort of like build like a huge amount that wasn't incredibly tightly scoped for really, really good reasons. And so we were like, oh, it would be kind of fun to just, and also we didn't get to hang out together very much because we both had our remits in Monzo and kind of had our heads down quite a lot. So we started having like coffee catch-ups, and we were both in sort of staff engineering roles there. So it was like, cool, we should hang out more, and that would be good for everyone involved. And it was like, oh, why don't we just get some beers in the evening and like build some stuff for fun? And that was I think your prompt, Stephen, was like, let's like, you were like, oh, I'm just kind of trying to think of like fun side projects. And I was like, oh, this sounds good. Like, I'd be well up for that. And then we had a long list, which lives somewhere, of just like what we thought were like quite small things we could build, which is hilarious looking back.
What was the stupidest thing on the list, Pete? I want to know.
There weren't any stupid things on the list. There's some interesting stuff. There was like a performance benchmarking tool. That was one of them that I remember you working on at one point, Stephen. But yeah, and so we were kind of like going through this list of like fun stuff we could build as like little side projects. And one of them was like, I wonder if there's a kind of turnkey, to Stephen's point earlier, like credit cardable incident automation thing that would sort of streamline a lot of, I guess, some of the value that we're finding with some of the processes and tooling here. And like, we could just like offer it up and people could pay like a few quid a month, and it might be like fun evening fodder and beer money material and sort of, that's where it started, and then there's like a fuzzy period in the middle, but that's what I remember anyway. And then my next recollection is Stephen going like, yeah, I'll see you at like 6 a.m. and we're working it together, and me going, what the fuck? Why would you get up at 6? Like, can we not do this in like evenings and stuff? But Stephen was a morning person, so I adapted. But it was actually quite good fun.
I remember you coming to me. I think you like WhatsApped me or something. You're like, oh. Stephen and I have started like looking at this thing. Would love to get your ideas here.
So obviously, given that you were building this at Monzo, it'd be like really weird if we just built a thing in a corner and was like never came and talked to you. So I remember chatting to Stephen and just sort of going like, we were essentially going, what would be the reasons to do this or not do this? And one of them was like, if Chris essentially says like, I'm not cool with this, then that kills it. And so there was a sort of, I remember debating how we approach this with you for a while, Stephen, of just like, do we think he'll say yes? Do we think he'll say no? Should we just pick something else that's like where there's no risk? And then, writing you a kind of like, we're doing this. Like, what do you think? I remember your first response was like, yeah, sounds good. And I think in the background, like what you really meant was like, please, can I join in? And I don't know, I just remember this like hilarious, like us trying to work out what you wanted. And then at some point, I can't remember. You probably remember this better than me, but I just remember a bit of like, very Britishness going on. Of us going
massive,
like, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Are you cool with it? And you're like, yes, I'm cool with it. And we're like,
yeah.
Great.
Well, I spoke to my wife, and I was like, oh, it's really, really good. It's really validating that like Stephen and Pete have seen what I sort of pulled together at Monzo and think there's something really, really good in it. And she's like, that sounds like something you'd be really interested in. And I was like, I'm really interested in it. I want to go. I want to go play in the fun incident like space.
Yeah.
And I remember. Go on.
We should give some credit to Jonas.
I was literally getting there. I don't think
at Monzo,
who's without his prompts.
German background.
Yeah,
I think busted through the awkward Britishness and was like, just talk to each other about this.
Yeah.
So a collective thank you, Jonas.
It was more that Jonas was like, have you talked to Chris? And our response was like, yeah, we chatted to Chris, and he was like, yeah, it's all cool, go ahead. And Jonas is like, I think you should chat to Chris again.
It was. I remember talking to him. And I was like, I can't go and ask them just to like join in. I was like, that's really awkward. Like, puts a bunch of like pressure on them because then they have to say no. And he's like, they would be mad not to want you working with them on this. And I was like, oh, I don't think that's true. Anyway, I remember being a really hard call, and you just been like, yeah, let's do it. Let's give it a trial. Let's just like. Go for 2 weeks, come build some stuff.
I think we said we'd do like a 1 month trial.
Yes.
Which was basically like, do you want to join us in our ludicrous like early morning, late evening like hackathons? I think we called it early as well. I think we got like a weekend. I've got a text somewhere from Stephen being like, this is great. Should we just do it? And I was like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we got a week into our month trial or 2 weeks or something. We were just like, this is great. Let's fucking go.
But it's lucky, right? Because the three of us, like, whilst we were all at Monzo, like, we actually didn't work close. Like, I think I met Stephen actually in like a one-to-one chat. We had one chat ever.
Yeah, I think you and I only we crossed over in incidents. That was basically like, I was like, "Hi, Chris, my platform person. Shit's fucked up again." Like,
exactly. It was, but it was a little bit like ships in the night. So like, it was totally reasonable. It would be like, let's try this thing because. There's plenty of people who I've worked with in the past who would be like, I would not want to start a company with you. And it's like, it's a big risk, right? It's a big
and those
risk.
people are, and Chris will enumerate them now on this podcast being recorded.
This is where I'll get the bleep machine out and he'll be like, boop, 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 boop.
You're already going to have to do that for like half of the words that I say. So you might as well while you're there.
Yeah. You mentioned, Pete, like early days though of like early mornings and late nights. And I remember, I think there's times now where like building a company is just hard. It's really hard. And it's very hard to switch off. Like there's this like, I think Stephen describes it as like there is just an infinite amount of work to be done. So you have to be incredibly militant about sort of having rigorous lines in where you shouldn't sort of go. But yeah, those early days, I remember like working full-time job at Monzo, and none of us were in like, I can go in and coast type roles. It's like, it's full on. There's a high expectations of that company.
It's also like an integrity point, right? Of just like
100%.
None of us were in roles where A, we could do that, or B, it just felt really shitty.
I've never been like that.
Side vibes, it's just like not the way, right?
Yeah. I am massively motivated in companies by like just wanting to do the best job and be sort of recognized for that and be seen as someone that people want to go to. So it's like, yeah, exactly. Not like any kind of mode of like, cool, we can sort of shift focus a bit. So it was definitely like, how do we cram more hours into the day? And I remember like alarm clock, 5:30, get up, coffee, like work, incident laptop on the stand here. Like three of us, like bleary eyed, like what should we build? And it's like, right, let's go.
This was like November as well. In fact, this was almost 2 years ago at this point. And so what I remember is like when it got light, that was time for my actual job. Because the morning was like, I wake up at like 5:30, 6 a.m. in the dark on a call with the two of you for like 3 hours or something. And then it would get light and then it'd be like, right, time for like my other
Yeah,
job.
and then for me it would be like do that, then go to Monzo for the day, and like it was such a weird gear change as well, because it'd be like just scrapping on code where you're like loads of to dos in the like comments in the code, where it'd be like to do. I remember my favorite one that I found us all over the place was like to do. Obviously not this long term, but it's fine for now.
What was even better is that had been added. I think Stephen added that comment to something, which I then copy pasted like 9 times around the code base. So then like that comment was just everywhere.
Yeah,
I think the team have quite rightly stripped those out now.
I think it was at to do. Obviously not this.
Yeah,
was the thing.
It was.
Yeah, it was. But it was that gear change of like, it was like 9 a.m. and it was like cool. And now I work for a bank where we have to be really sensible about like the kind of risks that we're taking and how we do things, which means it's like necessarily slower, but just like that pace change. And then like 5 o'clock would roll around, and for me it would be like go feed kids, you know, a bit of like family time, and it'd be like 7 p.m. It'd be like, sorry Joe, I'm back at it, I'll see you see you at like 10 p.m. for bedtime. But it was good. I enjoyed those days. I think it was just like a lot of fun. Although I remember there was a fun picture of me. I went around to Joe's parents, and it was like, because it was pandemic, we were outside, so I was like in like a big coat and like a hat, and then there's like Joe took a picture of me just fast asleep on a bench outside, and I'm like, yes, this is
like
what it's like.
Rock bottom. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think it was brilliant.
Man who's lost it all vibes.
There's something very satisfying about like when you're that tired, you can almost fall asleep on command. And it's really like, I don't know, there were lots of places I'd just be like, you know, I am sleeping and I'm in an awkward position, but it's all good. It's all good. But
that picture is in our memories channel in Slack somewhere.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
That reminds me, go on, Stephen.
It's tagged with, I think it's tagged with picture burning the candle at both ends.
That's right. Yeah.
Just you on a bench. If
I can work the magic when we pull this together into a video, I'll see if I can get like a screenshot of that up right now. I was just thinking about that spell reminds me of like early days demos. Do you remember the first demo we did? Like proper one?
I don't know if I remember the first like actual. I remember the first big demo. I'm sure we would have showed this to like some people, but the first big demo, it was Go Cardless, right?
It was. I think Stephen, you were leading it, weren't you? Was it you?
No,
or was it
I was leading it. I think.
Oh, were you lead? Oh, Pete was leading.
We had, so at that point we did double demos. So we had 2 people. So we had like one of us would sort of be the lead, and the other person would be like the chaos monkey, who would like be like, no, the database is down, and like they'd take actions and they'd do things, and we had this like sort of double act going on. And I think Stephen, you were my sort of second, which made sense because like Go Cardless was my that was my home turf.
I know. I think I was on the call just like observing and there for like question answering stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember this distinctly because you opened up the Slack thing and you're like, it's really simple.
I remember
you just
do
you do a / incident, and it was just like like computer says no, big red error type vibes.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah, it was like and made better by like, I think to set the context a little bit. So Lawrence, who was the principal SRE at Go Cardless and now actually works for Instant IA, we'd been showing him the tool and like getting his feedback, and then essentially done the big moment of going like, do you think Go Cardless would be interested in using this? And we were like, such a big company, like, you know, this would be like, you know, a huge deal versus like some small mum and pop shop somewhere. And he was like, yeah, like, you know, they talked about it internally, and it's like, right, we're going to do a demo. I think it was like 40, 50 plus, maybe more of their engineering team joined the call. So it was like really big. Everyone turned their cameras off. So it was like this faceless crowd of like, you know, 50 people. So it was like, I think the context made like a much bigger difference. Essentially, all I was looking at was like 60 black squares while I frantically stalled. Meanwhile, there's a separate Slack conversation going on where Stephen's going like, I know what it is, I'm on it. Like, stall. Like, the fix is coming, and I'm going like, fuck. So like, how's everyone doing? And then I'm like, I also don't know half of you because you've all joined since I left. And it was absolutely excruciating. And I'm glad that both of you do all the demos now.
Well,
but we did sign them up as a customer. So
yeah.
So while Pete was stalling, I was off in the side, deep into like a P-SQL console, and
I don't even know what went wrong. I was
essentially
like, what went wrong?
It was I think we had introduced the concept of like roles at this point. So role being like a hat you wear during the incident, like an incident lead or a communications lead or something. I think we had shipped with opinionated pre-built roles that you could not configure, and then we had moved from that to like user defined roles, and we had migrated all the accounts apart from like the demo accounts. So I had to sort of, insert into like X a bunch of just manual stuff. I'm essentially just typing as fast as I possibly could whilst Pete had extremely awkward conversations off to the side. But hey, it worked.
I think also, like, I think hat tip Lawrence, who like jumped in to save me a little bit by like asking me questions that I could answer. So appreciate that, Lawrence. That didn't contribute to us wanting to hire you, but it was like you were a very good egg.
He is. He continues to be a good egg.
Flounder.
I think
He does continue to be a good egg.
Yeah. It's the fun thing is we still have issues in demos, and it's like, so these days we like all of the like anyone sort of doing sales, that kind of thing, we get on like the rapid release, so we get like features first, so we get to try them out, and it means it's great because it's like you get to like show people a little peek of like what's coming, not just what they can get in the product right now. And the good thing is that I've now sort of like nailed the like just keep calm, like we have good processes behind the scenes for this stuff. It's always fun. Like live demos, right? It's just always going to be that way. There's always that slight like sweaty palms moment sort of thing. But I think
we span it in the early. I mean, like obviously everything's a lot more stable now, but I think in the early days we span it a few times as well. Of like we'd literally be on a demo and like PagerDuty would go off on my phone mid demo, and I'd be like, that's interesting. I have apparently triggered an incident by giving this demo. Like, I'm going to carry on, but like in the background, Stephen and Chris will be doing almost exactly what I'm about to show you. So like you can imagine, do you know what I mean? It was imagine this being done for real.
Yeah, I had one demo where Slack went down as well, which was really fun. Which is just like,
that's hard.
Oh, here's a little error, and I was like, and you do the next thing, and it's like, well, that doesn't work either, and I'm like, well, we're definitely up and running, and fun. It's all good. Do you remember the first offsite that we did? I think it was Y Valley, wasn't it?
I do.
That was like early days. Had a handful of like, I don't know, like what, 10, 15 customers, something like that.
Maybe not double digits at that point.
And so it was just the three of us still building, supporting the app, doing all the things, and we decided, I mean, in retrospect, what a ridiculous idea to go to the middle. So Y Valley is where, in like Wales? Is that right?
Wales,
yeah. So it's in Wales, possibly one of like the most, the remote places in the context of like, the United Kingdom. Terrible internet signal, the worst broadband I think I've ever had in like a house. And we were like, yeah, this will be fun. We'll go and do some strategic thinking about the future. And then I remember there was like an issue with one of our integrations with a customer who was in San Francisco because of Slack timeouts and stuff like that. And just that was a bit of carnage, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was to me, it was like the beautiful clash of like thinking that like when you do these early stage companies, they're so fragile, and like you have customers that are betting on like 10% of the product and 90% you as people. So you're sort of just got this little fragile thing that is starting to take shape. And it's just the kind of, you can't just take a few days to go and like discover yourself in the forest and chat about like what this thing is and could be, because at the same time, people are trying to use your, pretty scrappy, unstable, like first skeleton of a product. So you need to support that at the same time. And it was just such like a beautiful image of us walking along like this picturesque meadow in the summer, and then PagerDuty, the phone goes off as we are like 1 bar of signal, try and SSH into like the machine and fix it. I think on like a 30-degree hill as well. So it was just
there's a picture somewhere of I took a selfie of like where we were, and it was like the hill was so steep. I think we were halfway up and also like sweating like crazy. It was really humid. Like we'd massively underestimated this hike generally. So it was already like a bad call had been made. And then like PagerDuty went off. Credit to PagerDuty, reached us in the middle of a fucking like, halfway up a hill in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I don't think we SSH'd in. I think it was like we could spot the code change, or like we did it all. It was all on. I did it all on my phone.
But you reverted with GitHub or something, didn't you?
It wasn't a revert. I made a code change. I edited directly in GitHub on my phone the piece of broken code. Then like it CI ran, it got approved. I pressed go, and because we had like CI/CD, it just deployed to prod, and then messaged in Slack on my phone being like, "This is now fixed." And I was like, "This is horrendous, but also quite cool."
Just a PSA to all of our current and future customers: we do not do that anymore.
No,
Pete does not just essentially like text code into our GitHub repository and deploy code. But
it went through CI. This wasn't like a YOLO deploy. But yeah, no. To be clear, we have a very rigorous on-call rotor, and we have very good standard practices, etc. But early days,
legal notice ended.
Yeah, chill out. No one's listening to this anyway.
Someone's lawyer is listening to this, and you guys are going to get the calls about it.
You did what? Yeah.
I do remember that holiday though. I remember like a couple of things from that, which was like that was our first time of actually spending time as like individuals outside of like a working context. And I think there's always massive risk with those kinds of things, because there's people who I really like there's friends who I really like going to the pub with or going out for dinner with, and the prospect of going and spending a week with them, I'd be like, they would drive me absolutely mad. And I think when you live in close quarters and food and cooking is always the thing that is just like the pressure point. And no, I remember that just being like, I know we're onto something good here with the three of us, because I came away being like, I'd happily go and do that again. And we have done it again. And it's like, I don't know, it makes a big difference, I think.
And we know that Chris's primary strength is making poached eggs, and like that's a thing we can rely on. So
Yep. Poached eggs and I made a bolognese whilst you two were fixing one of the things that was going on.
Yes.
And I think bolognese is actually a really serious meal to cook, because I've had a lot of very average bologneses, and I think it's one of those ones where it's like, simple on the surface, but it's like, what's your bit of flair that you put in there, kind of thing.
Some people, and what's yours, Chris? You just laid that up perfectly.
That would be telling. That's my secret. I don't want to give it away. It's but people do have their little things. So like things that I think might be a bit contentious, and this is not really a cooking podcast, but I will go there. Is celery?
Pivot when it feels natural.
Celery. When you're like it's like sautéing your onions at the beginning. Celery in at that point, chopped up really fine. I hate celery. I'll be honest. I hate celery, but it adds a little peppery depth to the sauce. So that's one I'll give you. I'm not giving you any others.
This is what the listeners are here for. Is like, bam, instance, bam, origin stories, and then snuck in on the side, add your celery when you're sauteing your onions for your bolognese. There you go.
Yeah.
Mine is whole milk.
Oh, that's mental. That's
cream in a bolognese. It's actually like, surprisingly good.
I'm just so glad I cooked the bolognese now, because it sounds like this company might not exist if Stephen had done it.
It would just be me and Stephen enjoying our creamy bolognese, and you'd have like rage quit and walked off to the,
that's the clip for the podcast. Me and Stephen enjoying our creamy bologneses.
The hordes of Italians that descend on any kind of Italian cooking, YouTube video, I can safely say that they will agree with me, not with your random celery crap that you decide to add to your bolognese.
Incidentally, this reminds me, as per tradition of the podcast, we need a secret word, and it feels only fitting that it should be creamy bolognese. So if you reply underneath the YouTube video with creamy bolognese, the first reply will get an Incident.io like gift pack, which will have some lovely socks, lovely water bottle, and maybe some t-shirts in it as well. There we
Excellent.
go.
Nice.
And with that,
yes. Right. First holiday covered. Other seminal moments, I think, in any history, in like company history, is like first office. Very fitting for us. It was the old fire station in Old Street. Awesome office. Very, very fond memories. Do you remember going and like picking it out, finding it, Pete? I know you went and did a lot of scouting early days.
I do. I don't do any office management anymore, but I feel like this was one of the parts of my role that I genuinely enjoyed the most, in that it made everything feel incredibly real. And I remember, opportunistically, we decided that, so we were like, should we stay remote? And then we were like, no, actually, like, let's find like a little office somewhere where we can essentially hold ourselves up. So at this point, we had some conversations with Monzo, and we'd agreed we were going to leave. We had like plenty of notice periods and stuff, so we had like a 3-month period where we were kind of like in wind down mode. And we said, like, when we're done, let's get in a room. It'll be way more fun than this remote job, and we can sort of hustle and hack away. And so then I did like an opportunistic, found this like old fire station, felt very fitting. I remember, I think, WhatsApp video calling both of you or some subset of the two of you, and sort of doing a tour. Felt like one of those kind of virtual guides. We saw like 3 or 4 different offices, I think, and then found one that was like 4 people. It was for 4 people, and it had like an adjoining annex that you could like extend into that could fit like another 3. And we were like, oh yeah, one day we might get to like 7 people. So this is like a good investment in the future, which is hilarious. Looking back, that's the scale of ambition at this stage in the company's life.
So it's also where we painted it as well, right? So it was like a white blank box originally.
It was totally bare. Had some desks in the middle, and like first weekend, it was great. I managed to rope my wife into essentially letting me trawl around like plant shops and paint shops, and then manually painted we had a feature wall. It was incredibly fancy.
Yeah, the Farrow and Ball Hague blue,
right?
Which is
I can't remember
which is here on my wall.
It was Farrow and Ball. Is it the same colour?
Hang on, have you got it in your study there, Pete? Because Stephen's got it.
I don't have a Hague blue wall in my office.
He had it in his old office.
I had it in my old
office. Now since abandoned it, which I think is poor effort.
Yeah, maybe I should. Yeah, maybe I'll do it.
This just makes us sound like the most middle class,
it does,
British, out of touch company ever.
I don't know.
Well,
I think I can get
brand colours were born from me perusing and picking slightly at random.
The alternative positioning is that we are a design-led company that cares about the details. Which is how
I tell you what, I genuinely, I was so proud of that office, and like the difference between when we moved in and it was like this white box, and even the landlord came round and they were like, "This is amazing," and it was like I'd done a little geometric pattern on the wall that felt really fancy. We got like vinyl logo. It felt a bit like a jungle because I went a bit overboard on the plants.
I remember walking back from Liverpool Street, the plant shop in the middle of Liverpool Street, and essentially buying too many plants, B, one particular plant that acted a little bit like a sail. So when I was walking back in a very windy day, I essentially had this huge plant that was trying to constantly push me backwards as I was like.
It was It was like a massive fern, but like, so Stephen did this to himself in that, like, we left this plant shop with this massive fucking plant, and then like another small plant, and Stephen was carrying the big plant, and I was like, should we get an Uber, because it's like 15-20 minute walk, and this plant's quite large. And Stephen was like, no, it's fine. It's a lovely day. We'll just walk it. All I remember was getting halfway. Like, neither of us can feel our arms. We've had to swap like 3 times. Stephen is repeatedly getting blown around like a sort of napkin in the wind. Just like, oh man. And everyone walking past. So like, I'm in front. And so all I can see is people do it, like sort of walking along and then going, looking really weirdly at him. I apologize for listeners of the podcast who can't see the expression that I'm pulling, but like clocking this walking fern, just getting blown all over the pavement. And it was great. It was great.
How are we paying for all of this stuff at this point? I can't remember.
Revenue, man. Like this was like, I felt really proud at this point. Like so no investment. No, that's not true. We all invested £100 a month at this point.
That was how we paid. That was how we paid the early days Heroku bill and various other things.
And then office rent was like our first big like investment. And so we've made, I think we've made £3,000 of revenue or something, which is actually pretty legit at this point. And the office was $750 a month or like $1,000 a month or something. And we were just like, don't know, we've got 3 months of runway. Should we go for it? Yeah,
it was good. That office did look beautiful, by the way, Pete. I don't know if I've actually told you this, but like I remember coming in the weekend after, and it was just like, it was all the little details, like the little like wooden like monitor risers with the little drawers, and like you'd taken like a very, very anemic bland box, and I was like, this feels like home. And I genuinely think it makes such a difference, because like it's not just it's not just like the, you know, working in proximity. It's like the vibe you get from a place makes a massive difference. And I used to just, so like I remember at this time, so I was still working at Monzo, and I would take like a day off every few weeks to do like a full day of incident stuff, and then I would often be like early mornings before going into Monzo. I just remember being like, this feels so good. I'm so happy to be in this place. And I think it's something we've tried to like carry through. Like our offices have often been quite blank canvassy, and it's just like our current one. Like I will put some photos in the show notes or whatever, but like our current office now, very, very blank canvas, like big white empty box. And it now looks absolutely glorious. I reckon looks really nice.
Yeah. I think we talked about this a lot in the early days, right? Of like, especially when we're doing the remote on-site debate, and sort of essentially took the principle of like, if you're going to ask people to come into the office, there has to be some advantage, ideally in addition to like spending time with your colleagues. Like it has to feel good. You can't be like, you must come into the office because something collaboration, and then sit everyone in like shit cubicles. It's like, you know, it's like what's the point in that? Like if you're going to do it properly. So yeah, we spend a lot of time thinking about that stuff, and I care a lot about it.
Let's not open the can of worms of, you know, asking people to come into an office, because we don't ask people to come into an office. We find people who want to come into an office.
dangerous topic.
Abort. Move on. I guess the next like big milestone for us then was like hiring our first people, which felt like I remember feeling a very, very strong sense of responsibility at that point, because between the three of us early days, you're like, if this doesn't work, like we can go and find jobs, like we're pretty confident in that. But you suddenly now got, you know, so we hired our first like 2 engineers sort of very close together, and I remember just being like, oh shit, like this now has to work, and we now have to go down that route. I don't remember. Do you remember exactly how we sort of those conversations went, Pete? I know there were people you knew previously, right?
Yeah, so I knew Lisa and Lawrence, and both of them had separately said, like, you know, if you ever start a company, like, or you're going to start a company, like, let me know. I'd be quite interested. And so this wasn't like, you know, I felt really nervous because it's like saying to someone like, I think you should quit your job and come join me on this like crazy endeavor. Then it's sort of, I don't know, it's a big ask, right? And so instead, I think I did a more tentative, like, hey, you know that thing you said, like, where if I start a company, like, you'd be interested, like, kind of think we're going to do one, like, are you interested? And I think the response from both of them was basically just like, absolutely, like, yes. I don't think there was a huge amount of like deep, like hard selling needed from our side, which almost made it worse because it was like that level of trust of like, yeah, like, let's go, let's do this. I was like, oh God, and then I think what I did was like a massive anti-sell where I essentially went like, it was partly trying to make sure that they really wanted this and partly trying to absolve myself of some responsibility, going like, to be clear, this will almost certainly fail. This will almost certainly go like horribly wrong at some point. I don't even have any money to pay you. Like, you will not have contracts. At some point we will give you some equity, I promise. Like all this kind of stuff. And both of them were like unfazed. And I think, are still with us and doing an amazing job. And I remember like this was the same time that we were raising our seed round, and so like obviously Stephen's spending a lot of time on that and working with investors, and sort of me going like, please work. And then we had a dinner with them, right, where we like officially kind of, because it's basically, I think what I'd said to them is like, let's wait until, or like don't quit until we've raised the money. And I think they quit anyway. And so there was this like limbo period where I was like, right, well now if we don't raise any money, like we can't pay these people, and we can like they might be cool with that for like a few months. It's the early startup journey, but like this really needs to work. And then I can't remember quite the timings, but I remember there was like a dinner where we like got together.
An infamous dinner, Pete, because it
was your favorite place, right, Stephen? It was like a Stephen special restaurant.
Yeah, this was so there's a restaurant in Farringdon and Clerkenwell in London, which is called the Quality Chop House. So it was the Ravelin sort of local haunt. Used to get lunch from there, but it's kind of this old Victorian-y, like kind of simple, basic food, but cooked really well. And there's like a little private small room upstairs that you can rent to sort of have I don't know, 6 to 8 people around the table. So, I think we'd signed a term sheet at this point. So, we had extremely high likelihood of money in the bank. We were going through the legal side of the world, so it felt like a nice kind of bookmark to start we are a real company. We can pay you money and you'll have contracts and holidays and all of these basic things that you would expect as an employee.
Literally said, "Do I get holiday?" Because we just hadn't talked about any of it. It's like, yes, you get holiday, Lawrence.
Hang on, people are getting holiday at this company. What?
Yeah, employees, founders don't. You don't get holiday, Chris.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And yeah, so we then what happened then? So we had this meal, and I don't think so. Chris and I had not spent tons of time with Lawrence and Lisa, who are the first engineers we're talking about. So there was a little bit of like trying to build the relationship side of the world, but it was like a feel-good meal. Everyone was spending some time together. The problem was that Chris had lost his voice about an hour and a half before this dinner. So it was essentially, me, Pete, Lisa, Lawrence, very enthusiastically, like happily discussing, what happened, our plans for the future, and then just like Chris smiling and like nodding, and then occasionally forgetting that he had lost his voice, and then trying to talk, and then immediately after doing so, being really sad that he had lost his voice,
and occasionally
then everyone
us
kind of
like
awkwardly
passing things to Chris and going like, yes, and then going, oh yeah, no, you can't answer that question. It's like
it was so rough because I'd had like sore throat.
You were quite ill as well, right?
I'd sore throat leading up to it. Yeah, not been feeling super great, and I was like, I've got a bunch of stuff to do, and so. Yeah, I remember. I think it was actually I lost my voice. I was able to have a just about conversation with Lisa on the way to the restaurant. I was talking to her, and I was sort of scratchy, and then got into the place, and it was just like absolutely gone. Tried to make any noise, and it was like a squeak would come out. This has only ever happened to me like twice in my life. But I think there was I think the fun thing for me was like we were like, listen, we've had a chat as well as founders around like roughly what our areas of responsibility are going to be in the early days. And so it was like, Stephen CEO thinking about money in the bank and like that sort of side. Pete's, our sort of best technical person, put him on that. Chris will be doing like sales and CS, so doing a lot of like talking to our customers. And I just remember being like, yes, talking. I remember what that was like, Yeah, so I guess that's like a nice little trip down memory lane of where we've been. Stephen, where are we at now? What's going on? What's front of mind for you?
Yeah, so I guess to put timeframes in perspective, the earliest of days we were talking about was November 2020. So that was the sort of, just getting this thing off the ground. Chris sleeping on a bench was probably April 2021,
sounds about right.
Maybe May. And then we're now recording this in November 2022. So let's say this is like a year and a half of full-time effort on this company. So we're about 40 people, with about 35 in London, 5 in New York. We've raised 3 rounds of funding at this point as well, so close to $40 million, and really in this like strong initial growth phase. So that looks like working with a ton of interesting companies across the world. So that kind of looks in terms of like what we are, the problems we're solving for them. I think it kind of buckets up into 2 things. So the first one is like when stuff is really going wrong, solving the acute pain that people are seeing during that. So this looks like coordinating response efforts, communication, just generally like trying to put the fire out, so to speak. So these people, the people that are most interested in this side of the world, end up being kind of the end users, the folks that get paged, the people that are having to actually sort of support and put the fire out. And then you have this kind of secondary group of, maybe leadership or compliance or customer support, people that need to be informed but don't necessarily need to be as involved as the rest. So, this is like the response side of incidents. And then you have like, yes, but what about many incidents? So this is, for example, like how much time are we spending on incidents? Like which parts of our infrastructure are more unreliable than others? Like how much of my total engineering capacity is being spent on reactive work? So this generally tends to skew a bit more like leadership, CTO, VP engineering, CPO style. And yeah, we've spent really the past year, I think, trying to build the best product in the world to solve both of those problems. And in my opinion, at least, very far along, very far along doing that. And yeah, I think we're now in this this phase of working with some amazing companies and trying to find more. Really, like I think we are one of the best products you can buy in the world to solve this problem. But everywhere we go, no one has a product to do this. When they use it, they love it. So we're now in the phase of like, cool. Well, let's get some more people to use it because we know they're going to love it.
Yeah. I think the turning point for me on the point you made around like execs and the value to those, because originally this product started as we were engineers, we had an acute problem of like resolving incidents, responding to them. Is like with the recent like insights launch, I've actually, like, for a long time we had some graphs and I was like, oh, these are really useful if you're the CTO and this and that. And honestly, there's a little bit of like salesmanship in that, and like selling ahead of where you are. But the recent round of things that the folks have been working on, like legit, genuinely useful, looking at like on a weekly basis, like things like where's our engineering time going is incredible. And like what are the things that are causing us to, so I think maybe we're a bit unique as a company because we have every single paging alert that we get. Every time an engineer is paged, it translates into an incident. So we have like Sentry fires for any kind of error goes to PagerDuty plugs into Incident.io, auto creates you a channel, pulls you in, gets you off on that ground. So it means we have like high fidelity, like ability to see what's coming in, and then tagging of all these things so we know like what the shape of it is. And it's fascinating. I think I can go in and be like, why was this massive spike in like response, like time spent reacting to things? And it's like, oh, well, we shipped the new feature that allows us to plug into Jira and automatically keep Jira tickets up to date with what's happening in incident. And surprise, surprise, Jira is a nightmare to build against, and we had all manner of like errors under these different situations. So yeah, I'm feeling, I think the like interesting like turning point in any company when you're developing product is when you go from sort of selling a little bit ahead of where you are to being able to incredibly authentically and genuinely say, this is actually solving problems, not just for me, but for like a whole bunch of folks. And you can stand behind that with all of your weight. It's makes selling a lot easier. And so contrasting that to the early days where stuff's breaking in demos, these days it's rock solid and it's really, really good.
I think that for me has been one of the most fun parts of the past year, is just the customers that we get to work with and the people at those companies. So I'd never really sold stuff before this, and my mental model of like selling software to people was this somewhat arm's length transaction where you had to convince like this big scary group of people that your product was worth anything. And I think the reality couldn't be more different. It's ended up being like a set of close partnerships between like genuinely lovely people that have helped us shape and build the product. And one of the most common comments I got from investors when we were raising the round was like, you work with a list of amazing companies. And to be honest, like in the early days, every company that we signed up, we just asked them if we could put their logo on the website.
I was going to say, do you remember in the early days? It was literally, so we put every logo on. Like I think we were too ashamed to put any logos on until we got to like 5. And then we were like, yeah, that's like a row of logos. Let's have like a row. And then I remember having a conversation with you when we reached like 10, being like, cool, what's the short list of logos? Because we can't have like loads. And you're like, nope, all the logos go on the homepage. At which point it's like, cool, 15. And I remember us like every time we had a new customer land, I'd have to do this weird maths of like, is it like, it's like a 4x6 and then you add 1 and you're like, oh, fuck, like, okay, so now we're going to do like a 5 by, like, how do we structure the logo so it doesn't look horrendous? But on the flip side, what we had was all these people reaching out being like, oh my God, you have so many customers. And you're like, but no one puts all their customers on the homepage, but it worked really well as like a strategy.
The sad thing now, though, the really sad thing is it's now not that, because it turns out the bigger the customer you go to, the bigger the legal team, and the less likely the legal team are to approve use of customers. So I have this like this is fun. So I do spend a lot of time talking to customers, like either from like customer success or like sales angles, and like things that you often get the comment of like, oh my gosh, the logos you have on your website, and I'm just like, like if you could see the ones that if you could see the ones we can't put there, like you'd be like, oh my goodness. So we'll get them eventually. It's fine. I'm gonna just keep badgering them. Once we become like, give it like a few months after you've onboarded and you're like, oh my gosh, this software is amazing. It's like, that's when you go, hey, CTO, your legal team weren't so keen originally, but now that we've solved all these problems, could we please use your logo? So expect some exciting things.
It's legit. I think a lot of people will let us use them eventually, and it's kind of, it's frustrating not being able to talk about it, but it's cool. It's like a lot of the customers we're using now that like all of my family have heard of, like that's really cool, because up until then it was like a lot of them were kind of very technical companies or really kind of specific niche companies, right?
We could
now my wife's like, you've signed who? And I'm like, we have, but we can't tell anyone.
We could cause Chris loads of editing and
I was
video
say,
paint.
We
just literally list all the customers, and Chris is like has to bleep everything out, and then just blur out the.
Oh gosh,
I've been trying to be really careful not to like let anything slip, but maybe I should just be more cavalier and just give it.
Stop! Everyone, stop! There's a risk this is going to get editing heavy, so I think we should call it. We're about an hour anyway, so I think this has been a lot of fun. We haven't reminisced on this sort of stuff for a very long time. But we should definitely do this again. I think maybe we're teeing ourselves up for like a year in review, maybe, and before the end of the year, like what do we ship? What are our favorite features? A bit more product centric. You up for that?
Sounds good.
Definitely.
Let's do it.
I also think we should. We stopped our reminiscing at the point where the team joined, but there's sort of a year and a half where like a lot of early employees have their own recollections and reminiscences.
Well, we do. We have that memories.
Well.
We have the memories channel, and so that's one of my favorite things. Is we have a channel called Memories, and it's just like the dumping ground for any pictures of like, do you remember the time that Lawrence spilt his coffee all over himself, or
first offsite when we went to Edinburgh, and like all that stuff.
Exactly.
From this point onwards, I think like a lot of the memories are shared, and we should get the team involved.
That's true. We should do that. We'll do that. Nice. Listen, I think we call it there, but this has been a lot of fun. Let's catch up in a little while and do it again.
Nice.
Sounds good. See you later.
Cheers.